Hey everyone, this is Sorcerer's Quest. I got Rudeasaurus with me today, and we're going to be talking about his pool party deck as well as how he got into the game and kind of some of maybe some interesting questions that we have lined up. And with that, how are you doing, man?
Doing great. It's exciting to be here. It's always fun to be able to talk to other folks who love sorcery. So happy to have this discussion today. And as you know, this is a deck I've been working on for quite a while and recently did pretty well at the Florida Courtesan Cup qualifier. So excited to talk a little bit more about my process behind it and what it's aimed to do.
And you got your own YouTube channel as well, right? Archives of the Realm, right?
Yep, yeah, I do. And one of the big focuses there is on building community and engaging folks out at live events, at local game stores. It's something that I started up a little bit, probably about 7 months ago at this point, right before beta released, and it's been really fun to watch it grow and the channel itself bringing me into contact with folks like yourself. So it's been an awesome avenue to meet more people in the community.
Awesome. So, um, what first of all, what got you introduced into sorcery, or was it a friend? Was it just
Mhm.
looking around the internet? Did you back the Kickstarter, or were you a beta guy? Where's the start?
Yeah, so a friend of mine, actually, one of my oldest friends from grade school, had contacted me. We'd, bonded over playing trading card games in the early '90s, and kind of had that shared love of cardboard. He had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to put this game on your radar. It's called Sorcery. It has a lot of the original artists that we saw in Magic when we were younger." And the gameplay is really unique. They've got this cool grid system, and he put me in the loop with sorcery as a whole. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into the Kickstarter, but I did start playing shortly after the Kickstarter started arriving at people's homes. So I was able to get a lot of alpha cards and build out my set and start playing in person with a couple of local individuals. Luckily enough, being engaged at the beginning of that alpha release, I was able to get on the train early for beta, and was able to really get a good number of beta boxes to not only open myself but to share with some other folks, and it's been an absolute blast.
Nice. So, before we jump into your deck, what's your favorite kind of? What was the reason? I guess you keep on doing it, right? They keep on
Yeah.
playing sorcery. What's the thing that keeps you coming back?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest things is the connection to the community. The gameplay is fantastic, and I absolutely love the gameplay. It has a really deep tactical component to it, which I didn't really feel like I was getting with a lot of other trading card games. And in addition to the gameplay, the community is just absolutely fantastic. So at this point, I've traveled to, I believe, 5 different states to compete in organized events and tournaments. I've really enjoyed meeting people in the game stores all around the country and getting to know them. So I think for me, it's a combination of the really deep gameplay as well as the incredibly supportive community and folks that are welcoming and open. And I've made some really great friendships so far, just driving to different events or even flying to different events and meeting people, and even seeing them now at multiple events all around the country is just really cool.
Yeah, I'm hoping next year to be able to join you guys in your crusade of going to different places.
Yeah, and
Um,
it will be a crusade with Arthurian legends. So I think
yeah,
that's the
dude, it's
best
gonna be
way to
awesome. Yeah,
describe it. It's gonna definitely be a crusade.
yeah. With that being said, we're gonna jump over to the pool party deck,
Hmm.
and I have it pulled up here. So,
Hmm.
first of all, why name it pool party? I always like asking, kind of, what's the inspiration behind the name?
Yeah, yeah. So it was either pool party or let's beach, and I figured the pool party really gave the flavor of a lot of minions that, for instance, the sleeping giantess kind of looks like she's lounging around and hanging out at a pool party.
There you go.
So it kind of takes the earth, fire, aggro, and I put a number of cards in there that kind of skewed towards water for control and removal. So I figured Pool Party would be an appropriate thing to name it with, all the minions gathering around and then getting thrown up in the air by geyser, flown all over the map. Atlantean Fate, floodplains, things that really work on the control and turning everything into water.
Gotcha. So you chose Sorcerer as your avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just for the draw? Got to get those 2 cards every turn kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think Sorcerer is one of the best avatars in the game currently, especially for the gameplay style that I typically gravitate towards. The deck as a whole can function really well with about 5-ish sites, especially if I get the Philosopher's Stone and one of the cores out. I did only include one core, and I have a very specific reason for that. But I think the Sorcerer, specifically in a deck where there's a lot of low cost cards, is really great because you can just churn through your spellbook and find what you want. And once your sites are out, you're set. You don't really need to spend time drawing sites and placing them out on the board. So the extra draw really gives you an edge on your opponent.
Gotcha. So, with that being said, you have one aura, Atlantean
Mm-hmm.
Fate, and I don't know if I really need to ask why, but it's it's a really good card. If you have water, I don't know why you wouldn't put it in your deck, but
Yeah, yeah.
explain why Atlantean Fate.
So Atlantean Fate, I think, is an interesting card for a number of reasons. One, it gives you the ability to remove a significant number of your opponent's minions. It also can convert a lot of their site base in terms of the threshold that they have. So you can lock them out of particular elements that they may be running. And on top of that, it allows you to also submerge artifacts too. So it can be really helpful to submerge things if their avatar is standing on a non-ordinary site like their Philosopher's Stone, their cores. And as you probably have gotten familiar with my plays, watching some of the live streams, that's a core tactic that I use. I don't like relying on Dispel and Disenchant to take away the artifacts. I think submerging and burrowing them is a better bet. Because then it also gives me the opportunity, if I have a minion that can retrieve them, to go take advantage of their artifacts. The other thing that's really important about that is, we'll get into the deck a little bit more. I rely heavily on removal cards like Boil, and I think that being able to turn your enemy's sites into water threshold automatically turns Boil on, and in terms of me being able to use it as removal on their side of the board. And it also gives me more sites that I can attack with the pirate ship, which is also a waterbound minion. So Atlantean Fate, if I can get it out, is something that usually, unless they dispel it relatively early, gives me a huge advantage.
Gotcha. Moving into the artifacts, you have 4 artifacts total. You
Mm-hmm.
have the Onyx Core, the Philosopher's Stone, and the 2 Torchmer trinkets.
Mm-hmm.
Why only the Onyx Core? You kind of hinted at the
Yeah.
reason, but yeah.
Yeah, so for folks who have been engaging in a lot of competitive play, what I've found is that the cores are really great early on, but if you draw them later in the game, it's kind of a dead draw. And having four, or I guess 4 core or 3 cores and 1 stone, is a pretty significant number of cards. And if you do draw it late in the game, it really just doesn't really contribute that much. So instead, I opted to add in additional cards into my spell book that I think would give me more consistency in the deck. So the Onyx Core in particular is there mostly to give me threshold. I think that the Earth threshold is something that I found that I was drawing a little light on, and I wanted the core in there to give me that additional bit of threshold. So I'm not really relying on it for the mana, more so for the threshold that it would provide. And the Philosopher's Stone, I think, is an interesting card as well. But unlike the cores, if you get it late game, it can still be very helpful. And especially in a deck that you're running 3 colors with, because that allows you to then get upwards of 3 mana reduced per turn in terms of your casts. Finally, the Torchhammer trinkets, I think, are an incredibly powerful relic. One of the big reasons I run them, many decks now are trending towards Earthfire aggro, using a lot of boss controls, giantesses. Um, and by using the trinkets, it allows me to actually uh, attack those minions with the same minion. For instance, instead of trading one boss scroll for the other, I can drop a trinket on mine, kill theirs, and then mine survives with the trinket bouncing back at the end of turn. So not only does it give a little bit of extra damage if I'm directly attacking their avatar or site, but it also gives me the ability to take out minions that might have the same power by boosting my minions' power one up.
Gotcha. So, going on to the minions, you have four boss troll, four
Mhm.
violent, three colicky dragonettes, three slumbering giantess, two patrician cavalry, and two pirate ship.
Mhm.
Um, I'm gonna jump ahead. Why the pirate ship?
Yeah, so when I'm building a deck and I'm focusing more on the competitive side of playing, one of the things that I really want to think towards is the mana cost to power ratio and the likelihood of getting out cards that can do a substantial amount of damage and or block a substantial amount of damage. Pirate Ship is actually an incredibly powerful card for a number of reasons. One, it's an ordinary, so I can common sense for it and bring it into my deck. As I mentioned earlier, one of my goals with this deck is to put my sites in positions where I can either flood the opponent's sites, making them water sites, or turn them into water sites with Geyser or Atlantean Fate. So the pirate ship not only can be tutored for with common sense, but it's an incredibly powerful attacker and something that can block high power minions. Finally, just because it's waterbound doesn't mean it can't exist on Earth sites. So what I typically can do too is I don't want to say trick or bait my opponent, but by casting it on a land site, I can then use Geyser to flood that land site or even a floodplain, and that would give me the opportunity to then attack the next turn when they thought it was disabled and not been able to do anything. So I think that the cost mana cost to power ratio is huge, and the fact that it is ordinary and tutorable is a really big bonus.
Yeah, it seems good. I just was wondering about the whole. Have you seen that it performs well even though it is waterbound and like that potential of being disabled and not
Mm-hmm.
being able to attack? Has that not been a problem?
Yeah, so for me, it's actually hasn't been too big of an issue. I do only have two of them in there, so I'm not relying on it for my sole means of attacking and aggression. So it gives me a little bit of comfort or wiggle room because the giantesses are usually a huge target when they come out. So knowing that the pirate ships are in there and able to be pulled out if I need it with a common sense, I think is huge. And for instance, if I can bait my opponent into playing close to me, I do have a number of ways to flood sites. So even if the site is a land site, I can geyser it. And then one of the games I pincher attacked with a pirate ship from both sides and did 10 damage with that. And at that point, if they're disabled and taken out at the beginning of next turn, it really isn't that big of a bother to me because I was able to have such a heavy swing with them.
Gotcha. So, uh, I think most people are now kind of know why slumbering giantess, colicky dragonettes, and violimp are all kind of
Yeah,
synonymous with each other at this point.
yeah, yeah.
But if you want to just kind of quickly explain why those three cards are very
Hmm.
pivotal, kind of together and separately.
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you have the kobolds in there as well? I think the kobolds are great too, but without something like giganticism or another ability to increase their power, I feel that they're a bit lukewarm in the current deck setup that I have. And instead, I opted to have the Petrosian Cavalry, which we can talk about in a second. I think the Bosk Trolls are one of the absolute best minions in the game. They have one of the best, if not the best, power to mana ratios. 2 for 3 is huge. And if you have a Philosopher's Stone, it's a 1 for 3. And that's just incredible. The fact that you can have four of them, that they're tutorable as well, I think is huge. And if you are running Taurus Hammer Trinkets, you could potentially boost them up to 6 power. And that's really just a hefty, hefty thing to have to deal with. On top of that, pairing them with the trinkets, the opponent doesn't really know which one you're going to boost up, so you can essentially keep them playing very defensively having to think that either or all of your trolls could potentially be boosted up to a 6 power. The Giantess, I agree with you. I think it's pretty common sense. She is a phenomenal, phenomenal minion. The ability to wake her with the Dragonets and the Violimps are huge. I also use a lot of the Violimps for removal purposes. So I try to not use them to wake the Giantess, opting for more of a wake strategy with the Colicky Dragonets or some of the cards that I have in the Magic section, which we'll be going over. But the Violimps themselves can be combined to be pretty good for removal purposes, and I oftentimes will use them for that. Example, dropping 2 to knock out an Autumn Unicorn. Dropping 1 to do 2 damage, and then attacking with my boss control to bring it up to an even 5 to kill their Giantess. So that's another thing that I think is important to realize, is that the imps themselves, because it's a trigger that resolves during the actual main phase of the game, gives you the ability to also increase your offensive power of some of the lower power minions you might have.
Gotcha. So, I did look real quick at your sites, and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that you don't actually have any of the deserts to ping her
Yeah.
to wake her up. Just quickly, why was that a decision you made when it came to just you assumed that okay, Colicky, Violamp are good enough if I need to,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, obviously we'll get to the magics, but there are other
Mm-hmm.
ways to deal with her waking up
Yeah.
as well. But
Yeah, so with that, the decision to not use deserts was one that I went back and forth with. Ultimately, I wanted to also use as many special non-ordinary sites as possible, and I wanted to have as few land sites as I could. So if you notice, a lot of the sites that I have are actually the dual sites with water shared, because I want to take a very proactive approach against things like earthquake and bury. So in the meta currently, one of the large removal spells that you see in many, many decks is Earthquake, and it can be absolutely devastating, not only to destroy your minions and remove them, but also your artifacts that your avatar may be carrying. So the choice to not go with those deserts was an intentional one. Even though they would be nice to wake up the giantess, I think the benefit of having more water sites than land sites was something that helped me in the long run. And I have found in games that I am playing against those more traditional earth assisted decks that it almost negates, you know, a quarter of the removal if they can't bury or earthquake me. The fact that I moved away from ordinary sites as well as a whole also means that if I need to Atlantean Fate on my side of the board, I won't have an issue if they're, say, for instance, attacking a desert, because I can then, submerge on any of my non-ordinary sites. So it was a pretty intentional choice. One, I have found that I kind of maybe want 1 or 2 more fire
right.
sites in there just for threshold, and it would be nice to be able to ping to wake her up. But it's been working so far.
And then lastly for the minions, Patrician Cavalry, they only have one word in their box, and it's charge.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing feels worse than getting a Petrosian cavalry dropped and then dropping 3 Taurus Hammer Trinkets on it and swinging for 6. It's an incredibly powerful card. I think that it can help swing games, and using it to not only remove lower power minions but also attack directly. And if you're at the phase where you're kind of chasing your opponent down and they're on death's door, all you need for them to do is to get next to one of your sites and you can charge right into it. So again, it's tutorable, which is huge. So being able to common sense for it is big. And I wanted to have as many of my minions be accessible via common sense, because one of the things that I think makes a deck very competitive is how reliably it plays. So having things that allow you to pull the card that you need in that moment, and also having the mana curve be set so that you can really do anything you want with 6 mana, allows you to say drop a common sense, pull a cavalry, and then attack in 1 turn if you need to.
Nice, yeah. One of my favorite things to do with my Earth Fire deck is I have Jihad in it.
Mm,
So I drop Jihad,
yep.
play Patrician Cavalry, and win the game off of that.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, though, the magics. You got 17
Hmm.
magics in the deck. You have two common sense, one dispel, two fire
Hmm.
bolts, three geyser, two riptide, two blaze, two boil, one drown, one heat ray, and one flame wave.
Yeah.
What's up with all the ones? Just common
Yeah.
sense? Is that what
Common
it is?
sense,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah. So it's a pretty diverse spell list, and uh, when you're thinking about, and this deck, again, to put the caveat out there, this deck was specifically created with the purpose of performing in these very large, high competition tournaments, mostly the Courtesan Cup qualifiers that I've been traveling around for. So when you think about those events, the one thing that's important to consider is that every event that I've played at so far has been best of one. There's no sideboard, and what you really need to be able to do to be successful in these events is have a deck that performs reliably against a wide range of other approaches. So almost every card that I've included in the Magics actually can be used for two or three different things. And having one of each does reduce the reliability a little bit, but having the ability to tutor for them with common sense and to draw multiple cards per turn with the sorcerer gives me an opportunity to build up my hand so that I can have an armory of sorts to use the card that I need in the moment to do the thing that I need it to do.
gotcha. So, with that being said, common sense, search your deck, search your spell book for an ordinary
Mm-hmm.
card, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your spell book.
Mm-hmm.
Cost two, one threshold for Earth. Man, I don't know if the creators realized how crazy this card can become
Yeah.
off of like how many ordinaries, like Protrusion Cavalry, the pirate ship you have in here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or even you don't have it in this deck, but like Amazon Warriors is a
Mm-hmm.
5 for 5 drop, and it's
Yep.
an ordinary, and it's just
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
Why only the two? Like, have you thought about going up to three?
I did, yes, and I've been going back and forth on that as well. I think for me, having the range of spells has been really helpful. And if I were to drop one to add an additional common sense, I don't think it would be a break decision. And having the extra common sense would probably be helpful. But I also wanted to limit or avoid the potential for drawing a common sense and not needing it. So I think there's a balance that competitive decks need to strike where you're thinking about how can I maximize the output that I have to maintaining the defensive capability that I might need. And from what I've seen in the games that I've played, and at this point, well into the hundreds of games, that decks that I do really well with are ones that are very aggressive and that I'm constantly pushing for. So I think having an extra spell that allows me to be aggressive and then holding that common sense until I absolutely need it has been enough. And there really hasn't been a point in most of the games that I've played where I thought, oh man, I really wish I had a common sense right now. It's something that when I draw it, I'm always excited to see, but I tend to hold it so that I can use it to respond to different scenarios that I might find myself in. So I prefer to rely on the cards themselves that I have in the moment to accomplish what I need. And most of the damage that I'm going to be doing is going to be coming from minions, which the deck is almost 50% of.
So, dispel. So we've practiced a couple times together,
Yeah.
and you told me one time that you hate Enchantress when it comes to
Yes.
play.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the dispel is in there for the Enchantress, I'm assuming, more than anything
Mostly
else.
yes. Yeah, mostly yes. But there's a couple of ways I've found to actually deal with Enchantress decks a little bit better. And in this event, this deck actually performed quite well with that. So Heat Ray being one of them, as well as Boil. And I think that Dispel is something that I do keep in there mostly for Enchantress and Chains of Prometheus. I absolutely hate the Chains of Prometheus. They have, like, I've gotten wrecked by them multiple times. So I even thought about putting two in there, just potentially to negate the chains. But um, with typical removal against Enchantress decks, things like Bury, Drown are really hard to do because you need to all be, the enchanted or activated aura needs to be on all four of the same site to be able to use those. So instead, I can use things like Boil, which will destroy all minions occupying a single water site. And that allows me to take out minions that have, or auras that have been activated and turned into minions. I've also been toying with throwing in Disintegrate in there, which would also banish a minion if I need to. So I think that the Dispel's in there if I absolutely need to take out an abundance. But for the most part, I found that the removal I have is working. And the fact that Heat Ray goes through multiple sites allows you to hit the same activated aura multiple times. So it actually can do 4 damage instead of just the 2.
Gotcha. And so let's do Firebolt and Heat Ray together. Firebolt
Mm-hmm.
shoots 3
Mm-hmm.
separate projectiles, and Heat Ray, like you were saying, shoots
Mm-hmm.
through in a
Mm-hmm.
cardinal direction and hits 1 target on each of those sites.
Yeah.
So why the 2 and then the 1 for Heat Ray versus like 2 Heat Ray, 2
Mm-hmm.
Firebolts?
The firebolts are also in there to take out things like tufted turtles. The ability to shoot 3 separate projectiles is very helpful. It also allows you to take out potentially 3 1 power minions or 1 1 power and 1 2 power minion. And I do use both to potentially wake up the giantess as well. But the firebolts are in there because something like a tufted turtles just running around, they can negate my big 5 power minions. So having something that will allow me to take them out with 1 spell cast is preferable.
Gotcha. And then
Yeah,
the
and
Heat
they
Ray.
also are game. Yeah, and they are game winning conditions too. So,
Right. Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, being able to have those, especially cast off the River of Flame, if I
Right.
can win the game for me.
And then the 1 Heat Ray, is it just because you were limited on the slots, or
Hmm.
or are you just like, you know what, it's not as good as Firebolts?
Yeah, I think for me, I felt like it wasn't accomplishing the purpose that I wanted as much as Firebolts, but there are some scenarios where it can be helpful. For instance, if they've got a big uh, abundance that is animated on top of their avatar, I can shoot through it instead of the firebolts getting absorbed by the minion immediately. So I wanted to have 1 in there so I could also tutor for it and pull
Right.
it out if I needed. And I had considered Ice Lance as well, but I figured the 1 Heat Ray was fine.
Yeah, and with the new rules update with how projectiles work,
Yeah.
Ice Lance is. Uh, I don't know if it can ever recover.
Yeah, I haven't run 1 in the deck since then. So
Yeah.
it was more so like I would like to have more cards from more diverse range of elements, so that if I found myself in a position where I didn't have threshold, or my threshold was knocked out potentially due to a Lanian Fate, I could still cast the Ice Lance, but I still decided not to go with it.
Gotcha. And Geyser, the
Yeah.
reason you built the deck, I guess,
It
right?
is, yeah. Geyser's the MVP in this one. It's got 3 uses. One, very straightforward. You can give things airborne. Actually, there's 4 uses to it. You can give things airborne to potentially move a unit or a minion, rather, to a site diagonally, which is huge. The flooding of the site can allow me to either drown a root spider, which was one of the big things that I was thinking of. Like, how do I manage or handle root spiders or make it impossible for them to get on my board and start controlling what I do?
Right.
So I can use them for root spider removal. I could use them to flood the site, which allows me to either riptide something into it, or allows me to move my pirate ship in to attack. And then finally, you draw a card with it, which is incredible. Geyser as a whole, it really was the inspiration for the deck. I wanted to find a way to build a deck around it. And it's been phenomenal. It accomplishes all those purposes. And back to what I was mentioning before in terms of what makes a deck really competitive. I think the thing that makes a deck really competitive it's its ability to reliably perform all the functions you need it to perform, which means having a wide range of responses with a limited card pool to any given situation you might find yourself in.
Gotcha. So, question:
Mm-hmm.
have you ever geysered a pirate ship and made a flying ship happen?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Nice.
100%.
Nice.
Yeah, so one of the plays in one of my last games in Florida, I used a floodplain to flood one of my sites that an opponent had attacked, and my pirate ship was disabled on one of their land sites. So I geysered the pirate ship, flooded it, activated it, and then the airborne ability allowed me to move diagonally and kill the minion that had been attacking my previous land site that was now flooded by my floodplain. So yeah, I've made the Flying Dutchman 100%.
Nice. Um, Riptide.
Hmm.
I like the more I play with Riptide, the
Hmm.
more I like it.
Yeah.
The reason being is I've pulled my avatar with it. I've pulled
Hmm.
things that it's like a blink, but you get to draw. Well, I guess blink gets to draw a card as well, but it's
Hmm.
kind of I don't know. The ability to pull something into water is nice for
Hmm.
your enemy, like to get an enemy unit in there, but
Hmm.
also to be able to move your own stuff around is
Hmm.
exceptional.
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree. And one of the things that it can be really helpful for as well is repositioning enemy units. So I would say that Riptide actually is what won me most of my games. It allowed me to do things like pull their Pudge Butcher out of line of sight with my avatar, putting it on a water site, and then rendering it susceptible to drown or boil. It allows you to reposition your units, as you said, and the draw card is fantastic. So you can also chain multiple riptides together and reposition multiple things and set yourself up to clear out some of their minions while also drawing two cards. So I agree with you. It is a fantastic card.
one thing that I wanted to ask is it again just like I want the variety, I want the spice of life factor
Hmm.
of only two?
Yeah, yeah. I think that when I think about a card that I'm using and the number that I'm going to select for it, I need to think how is this going to get me to my end goal, which is obviously for a competitive deck, getting your opponent to death's door as quick as possible and winning the game. I see Riptide as a card that facilitates plays, but not something that would ultimately, put me in that position to deal the death's door blow, unless it's something like where I'm pulling their avatar in. So I think that there is a bit of a situational nature to it. And again, having two common senses in there ultimately gives me the ability to fish for them if I need to.
Gotcha. So we got on the docket next is Blaze.
Yeah.
I I play this a lot. I have all
Hmm.
three copies in my Earthfire deck, and
Hmm.
getting that +2 movement, moving something 3 spaces. Again, in my opinion, movement is king in this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Positioning matters so much. Also, I didn't realize it until I went onto the Collector Art House's website, but there's a goat behind
Yes. Yeah.
the text box, and
Yeah.
now I want a foil version for that reason.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, tell me why Blaze in this deck.
Yeah, so I was going back and forth between Blaze and Mad Dash. I like the draw capability of Mad Dash, but I do think there are some downsides to the card. So again, thinking back to kind of my mantra, that like each card has to have multiple uses. The use for Mad Dash is really moving an extra space and drawing a card. So it can do some things and set you up for success in some regards, but Blaze I think just takes it to a different level. So the things that I think make Blaze incredibly good is it gives +2 movement, and you can't be intercepted, which is key. So you can run straight through that big minion. You drop your Petrosian cavalry. They think that they're going to block you with their, gigantic minion right on your doorstep, and you run straight past it. right through and then hit their avatar. Um, the other thing that Blaze allows you to do is wake up your giantess. So dropping that fire along the path can wake her up, and it can also give you the ability to take out some of their lower level minions. So I think that it has about three different uses, and that's one of the reasons why I chose that over something like Mad Dash. The card draw I do miss a little bit, but the fact that you can do it, not be intercepted, and you move an extra space and drop that fire is huge.
Yeah. So Boyle,
Yeah.
this is the one that I was I like Boyle,
Hmm.
but it's one of those things where I'm not a huge fan of the has to be two steps away
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
because it makes it so it's situational. My
Hmm.
sorcerer or my in this case the what is it, River of Flame
Hmm.
has to be in a specific spot for it to work. How well
Hmm.
does Boyle work in practice?
Uh, I would say that, judging based off of my opponent's reactions when I use it, very very well. So there's nothing uh, worse than having all of your minions get riptided into the same square, and then all of them killed with one card. So I think for me, Boil is a defensive card that I use. I try to hold it to wait for them to get onto my sites. And I agree that the up to two steps can be a little limiting in terms of how you're going to use it. But the fact that it destroys all of the minions on that site, and I can pair it with Geyser to or Floodplain to turn most sites into water sites, and then subsequently boil, I think has been an incredibly helpful thing. And one game, an opponent had a Pudge Butcher down. They had Atlas Wanderers and a number of foot soldier tokens that had all converged on the same site. And
Oof.
I flooded it and boiled it, and I felt
Ooh.
terrible afterwards. But it is a really effective card at taking out a lot, which is why I only want two. Again, you can use common sense to tutor for it, and it being a very situational card, I think, is part of that too. But the fact that the deck focuses so much on turning sites into water sites, it allows you to get the utility from Boyle that I think it needs to be a contender for a useful card.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't just
then
include it in a fire deck. I think in a deck
right.
where you don't have the ability to determine if your opponent's sites are going to be water or not, it's a wasted slot. But thinking about ways that you can combo cards, I think, is critical to creating one of those reliably competitive decks. And
Gotcha.
Boyle just so happens to work really, really well with Floodplain and
Right.
Atlantean Fate, as well as Geyser.
Gotcha. So with that, you got the three at the end: drown, heat ray. We kind of already talked about heat ray. So
Hmm.
just drown and flame wave. I'm assuming
Hmm.
flame wave is like another one of those finishers.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't hide from it. It's gonna
Hmm.
burn you somehow.
Hmm.
And then drown. That was one that I was really curious about. The one drown
Hmm.
versus like a berry because you do have earth.
Hmm. Yeah,
Why
so
why the drown over the berry?
the drown again pairs really well with Geyser and Floodplain. I can use it for removal, but the other thing that I can use it for is to submerge one of my opponent's artifacts. So Philosopher's Stone, uh, Seven League Boots, Screaming Skull, etc. So I went with the one drown just in case I needed the ability to take an artifact out of the hands of a battle mage or another minion that is kind of romping around doing bad things to me, and can also serve as removal too. It being an ordinary, I can tutor with common sense. So I think it
Gotcha.
just kind of fits into that picture of I want to have a wide range of cards that give me access to do the things that I need to do, and I don't have the ability to turn water sites to earth sites, but I can turn any earth site except for bedrock into a water site.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Let's move over to the sites real quick.
Mm-hmm.
The one I was I'm not a good color out of space playing. I've just accepted that. Maybe I just need to play with it more. But every
Yeah.
time I see color out of space in a deck list, I just take it out and put something else in because I'm just like I just it's gonna come back to haunt me
Hmm.
eventually. That's how I feel about it. It's like as someone
Hmm.
will play, a Rift Valley or something, and then all of a sudden it has no mana, it has
Gets
no
turned off.
purpose. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
why? Like I could have just put another site here. So
Yeah.
Color Out of Space, I understand why it's good. I guess I'm bad at playing it.
Yeah, well, it's a gamble too, right? And so many
Right.
decks now are using either Imperial Road or Rift Valleys. I'm seeing more cornerstones being used too, which can also potentially turn it off. I think that for me, knowing that it's a gamble and not relying on it is positive. But if I can get it out early, or I get it in my opening hand, it's phenomenal because it automatically boosts my mana or my threshold curve and gives me the opportunity to play almost any spell in the deck out the gate. So for me, I think it's been turned off about 2 or 3 times, but the benefit that I've been able to get from it has been really substantial. And the other thing that you'll notice a little further down are mirages. If it gets turned off, I'll just bounce it back to my hand with a mirage. And by that point in the game, I probably don't need the 4 threshold.
Gotcha. So, a question going back to just like we have two different four threshold sites right now. We have
Yeah,
Pristine Paradise and Color Out of Space.
yeah,
I see Color Out of Space. I don't see Pristine Paradise.
yeah,
Is it because of the whole if there's something on it you can't?
yeah,
But
yeah.
like I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit more guaranteed. I don't know. Maybe I'm again. I'm probably just bad at Color Out of Space, but I just like okay. You can play near it, but like it at least it's not permanently cut off
Mhm.
if I don't have a void.
Yeah, I think for me with Pristine Paradise, one of the big things is that getting it early in the game is really challenging because it forces you to waste a turn, potentially moving one of your minions or your avatar to a location to not be standing on it. So I personally like Color Out of Space a bit more because of that. I think I have a little bit more control over the possibility of getting a Color Out of Space with the void there. The Pristine Paradise, they could plop a minion on top of it and start swinging,
Gotcha.
and now it's lost all thresholds, so I can't really do what I need to do to destroy it. So I thought about it, and it's still something in the back of my head. I'm like, maybe I'll sub one in. But for now, I kind of prefer the color of the space.
Gotta get that pristine pool, dude. um, so we got three different um, dual lands here. We got the
Hmm.
aqueduct, we have the oasis,
Hmm.
and the step. You
Hmm.
went with three aqueducts, three
Hmm.
oasis, and two steps. I'm assuming
Hmm.
because you can't bury on a water site, so I
Correct.
want
Yeah. Yeah.
more water ones than I want earth
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, I've also gone back and forth with the third step, but I don't really think I need the extra earth threshold, and that's actually why I put the earth or the onyx core in there to kind of give me the potential for a supplemental earth threshold. But the thing that I need the most is water, and I want to have most of my sites water to kind of eliminate the potential for berries or for earthquakes. And what I've found is that most people don't run things like drown in their decks unless they're playing a deck similar to mine where you can force your opponent's water site or sites to become water. So I don't see a lot of drowns being played in decks that just splash water unless there's a way to actually turn your opponent's sites to water. So I think it gives it more of a defensive capability.
And then you have the floodplains.
Hmm.
Floodplains are so good. Like
Yeah, they're brutal.
being able to flood an adjacent site is helps you
Hmm.
with your curve if you need to get that Atlantean fade out and you haven't seen another water site.
Hmm.
Fantastic. It also makes it so your pirate ship can move up to your opponent's site and attack that.
Yep.
That's fantastic too.
Yep.
I Whenever I see a water deck, I'm like, if you don't have floodplains, I don't know what you're doing.
Right. 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 And it kills burrowed root spiders or anything else
Right.
that's burrowed. I mean, it's so good, and you can have three of them, which is even better.
Right. So Imperial Road.
Hmm.
it's if you want to go fast, you got to get Imperial Road, right? You want to
Yeah.
get to that mana as quickly as possible before your opponent, or just
Hmm.
I want to get to the five, or what is the curve you want to get to? You usually hitting
Yeah.
five and then stopping
I want
on
to hit for
sites.
5. Yeah, I want to hit about 5, maybe 6 to give me a little flexibility if they sinkhole or something happens. But I would say 5 or 6. I usually, depending on my draw, if I get a really good hand and I've got, the giantess or the imps, potentially dragonets, etc., I may stop at 3 for a bit to pump out some spells and drop some minions. But I do think that getting to 5, also for site and location control, can be helpful. Not only is Imperial Road really good for ramp, but it can be played in a way that can give you a very aggressive opportunities to damage your opponent. I've actually been playing with strategies like playing Imperial Road first if I get it in my opening hand, and forcing my opponent to think, do I want to place a site right next to this site? And if
Fair.
I do, I can potentially get a boss control on turn one, and get it ready to go by turn two.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where it's, hey, if you want to put a site here, it just means that I get to attack it for a while.
Right, essentially, yeah, and it's backfired a couple times. Like they dropped Dome of Osiris or Bottomless Pit or
Gotcha.
something. I'm like, oh no, like this is a terrible decision. But it's great, especially against Pathfinder decks. It is such a brutal card. I had one game where I got 2 Imperial Roads in my opening hand, and I was able to get right next to their starting site on turn one,
Jeez.
and yeah, like ramped up to 3 on turn one. So I think that having them in there is good. You can also uh, moving further down in the site list, Mirror Realm and
Mm-hmm.
Mirage. You can bounce them with Mirage, and you can Mirror Realm them as well. I've actually gotten 5 sites out in one turn using a combination of Mirage, Mirror Realm, and
Dang.
Imperial Road.
Dang.
Yeah,
So with Mirage, is it really as good as it seems?
yeah,
I've never
yeah. It's
personally
phenomenal.
played with it, but I always thought it was just like a pipe dream. It's just like, it's,
Hmm.
you know what? I'm bouncing a site. Do I really want to bounce a site to
Hmm.
my hand just to
Hmm.
play it later? And I guess it's that good.
Yeah, I think it's great for mid to late game. I wouldn't want to use it early game. If you need to use it in a pinch for a fire threshold, you can. But there's no better feeling than locking down all of your opponent's sites with a smokestacks, but then bouncing it with a mirage and activating your sites to do what you need to do with them. You can bounce Mirror Realm. You can bounce Pillar of Zyros. You can bounce Imperial Road. So
Mm-hmm.
with Mirage, you can technically pillar 3 times. You can, do Imperial Road. Let's see, two, that's 5 times. Same with the Mirror Realm. You can do that 3 times too. So I think it's great for board control. And when you're thinking about this deck, so much of it is manipulating the battlefield, right? So potentially bouncing a floodplain and then moving it to the other side of the map so that I can flood their new land site that they placed, and then attack with my pirate ship. So it gives more board control in addition to things like just the basic threshold.
Gotcha. So Mirror Realm, it's copy a card.
Hmm.
Gotta love it. I don't.
Can be anything,
Right, exactly.
even
It's
your opponent's sites.
mm-hmm,
So
which is
uh,
fantastic.
yeah, there's no better feeling than taking that really really good site that they have, and then using it against them.
Gotcha. So and then let's see here, Pillar of Zeros. Gotta love that Death Speaker hate, right?
Yeah, Death Speaker Hate and Heal. It's probably, in my opinion, the second best site behind
Mm-hmm.
Mirror Realm.
Yeah, and being able to bounce it with Mirage, I completely glossed over the fact that you could do that, and that
Yeah.
seems being able to reset Death Speaker twice or 3 times seems
Yep.
brutal.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
And then River of Flame, just need that extra spellcaster for the
Yeah.
boils and other such.
Yeah, and it
Like
allows you to cast spells underground too, which is
right,
nice. So if they do have spiders, you can firebolts or heat ray them underground. It's a pretty nice card for that too.
And then smokestacks is just denial of your opponent
Hmm.
getting the sweetness.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing worse than having all of your opponent's floodplains, nullified, or nothing better for you, I guess.
Right.
I guess for me, I wouldn't mind the floodplains because it gives me the opportunity, but I like having control over what they can do. So I think a deck that does really well in a competitive sense is one that forces your opponent to respond to you instead of you having to respond to them. So the more things that you can do to take away their opportunity to do the things that they want to do means that you're going to have that much more of an edge. You want to force them to use spells, play minions, and put sites in places that they don't want to do it, so that you can kind of take control of the board.
Yeah, one of my buddies that plays with me, he says he's kind of he came from Magic, went to Flesh and Blood, and then went to Sorcery, and he likes to say this. He's like, if if you're the one that's asking the questions and making your opponent
Mm-hmm.
answer the questions, you're in a good spot.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's totally it, and that's one of the things that the smokestacks allows you to do. It just
Hmm.
turns things off. And say you get lucky on your first draw against a Pathfinder, and you get two Imperial Roads and a smokestacks. Like that's it's
Yeah,
so brutal.
it's amazing. So with that in mind, we're gonna go over to the kind of quick questions
Hmm.
section of the from the ugh, of the video.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been talking too much.
Oh, you're good.
What? Let's see here. Let's see. What is your current favorite artist in sorcery?
I'd have to say Melissa Benson for sure. I love her art style. The thing that I also love is that it brings back so many memories of when I was younger. So cards like Polar Bears, the Screaming Skull. When I was playing my first game of Sorcery on Tabletop Simulator, before I had really decided whether or not I wanted to get very invested in the game, I noticed her signature on the bottom of the card, and it brought back all of these memories from when I was a kid. Things like Fire Elemental and sitting there playing games with my friends when we were really really young. And I just love the style of art. I like the way she frames her art. I love in particular the Screaming Skull,
Yeah,
and
it's an amazing card.
oh, it's so cool. Just the contrast, the composition, everything about it. The salamander is really cool. I love the juxtaposition of colors. So I would have to say Melissa Benson is probably my favorite artist. A lot of that's due to nostalgia, but the thing that's so hard is that all of the art in this game is phenomenal.
Yeah,
So
it's fantastic.
I really have a hard time saying favorite because they're all so close for me. I love like Ian Miller's stuff. The River Flame is so cool. Just it's such an interesting, different style. Papetti, um, everyone, all of the art is just fantastic.
Fair enough, dude. This game is. It was interesting when I pulled up the card list for the first time,
Yeah,
and I was just kind of looking through. I was like, these aren't all. It's not. It doesn't look consistent.
yeah,
How well will this look when it's presented on the table and you're playing?
yeah,
And surprisingly, it just somehow melds together. Eric
yeah,
does an
yeah.
amazing job of somehow making it so they're very distinct art styles, but yet they
Hmm.
somehow fit into the narrative altogether without feeling discordant.
I agree with you. I think they were also very thoughtful as well in terms of, I'm assuming, assigning artists a certain series of cards. For instance, Border Militia with another, a number of other cards that, all work around mortals.
Right.
Uh, you know, the cards I think that typically we'll see a lot of play together are done by the same or artist with a similar style. So you get that kind of cool narrative feel, and you can even see a little bit of the, like backstory that the artists, I think many of whom were trying to put in, like this subtle similarity in a number of their cards to show that there is something going on in the background, like Call to War, the Caravan. If you look, you can see these subtle similarities with some of the cards: Critical Strike, Overpower, etc.
What are the top three cards, gameplay wise, that you enjoy playing the
Mm-hmm.
most?
So right now, probably no surprise based on the deck we just discussed, but I've been really enjoying Geyser, Riptide, and Boil. I think that there's a number of different ways you can use all three of those together. So those are probably my top three in terms of what I'm using currently.
And then top three cards art wise.
Ooh,
Probably
that's a
going
good
back to
one.
Melissa Bennett.
Yeah, yeah. So I do love hers. But if I'm thinking about like the top three art wise, and not necessarily the top three that I play, I would have to say Minecart Madness. I absolutely love the art in that. It's just so much fun. I love Atlas Wanderers. I think it's an
Yeah,
incredibly cool looking
fantastic.
card. Just the feeling behind it is just really really neat. And I think Starseeds of is also a really cool one from an art perspective.
Hmm.
It just feels very different. So yeah, I would have to say those three are at the top of my list. But again, I love so many
Right,
of them. Screaming Skull probably should be up there too.
right. Dude, when I saw Atlas Wanderers for the first time, I was like, this guy is playing pool on top of the
Yeah.
world and he's lining up the shot. That's how I saw it. I
Yep.
was like, he's
Yep. Yep.
lining up
Yep.
these planets to just nail them together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that's what he meant, but that's what I thought when I saw it.
Right. Well, the beautiful thing about art, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? So I think the
Right.
artist conveys a message behind the works that they're doing, but also leaves it open for interpretation so that the individual that's viewing the art can make their own inferences and make their own connections based on what they're seeing.
So we got the four elements: water, air, fire, earth.
Hmm.
What's your favorite element?
I think right now it's actually probably fire. I think fire is one of the most strong elements. It has a wide range of cards that give a lot of utility. And I probably could make a fire deck, like a mono element fire deck that does pretty well. Then I would have to say Earth is my second. I think water is a great support. I don't know if I could really make a very strong water deck by
Right.
itself, but I think the other three are good. Air is also incredibly good. It's great for mobility, card draw, etc. But I do love the damaging components of fire and the fact that they play so well with the sorcerer.
Gotcha. What, if any, are your hopes for Arthurian Legends? Things you hope
Uh,
card wise, art
yeah.
wise, anything. It could be anything.
So I was joking, with pretty much everyone I talked to about this, but I would love to see Monty Python references as curio cards,
Yes, that'd be awesome.
um, like a dodge roll card for Earth called Runaway,
Nice.
um,
Dude, I want the
uh,
Black Knight and he's just hopping
the
on one
Black Knight,
foot.
Flesh
Yeah.
Wound, do two
Yes.
damage or one damage to target mortal. I think that I would like to see some of that, but I also am excited to see how they use the new cards to complement cards that already exist and use current cards in a way that we haven't even thought about yet. I think that the theme is something that I really like. I love the kind of the lore behind that. I was a kind of a King Arthur kid when I was younger, and I
Yeah.
love the mythos surrounding it, and I think that it's going to be neat to see some of those mythological creatures and kind of maybe historically based personas uh, be reimagined in a classic art fashion. So I'm excited for that. I'm really excited that they're not just AI created digital art.
Right.
I can't wait to see how the artists choose to represent these figures. So I think we're gonna see things like King Arthur, Guinevere.
Right.
Obviously, we have the Round Table already. Probably Excalibur as a relic or
Yeah.
weapon. Um, and I'm just excited to see how many other things like are we going to get a similar to Grandmastered Wizard card Merlin
Right. Yeah.
or Archimedes?
Mm-hmm.
Lady of the Lake, and potentially even some auras or other cards that depict events that have occurred and have
Mm-hmm.
an effect based on that. So like the Black Plague, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
as an aura that can allow you to disease or poison something,
Gotcha.
that bounces from one minion to the next if they get infected, and take
That'd
the
be so
infection
cool.
with them, or leprosy,
That would
you
be so
know,
bad. They'd get out of
reduce.
hand real quick.
Right, yeah, like reduce this minion's power by one each turn, and you kind of imagine their body like
Mm-hmm.
slowly falling apart. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle the historical context and all the real world things that were occurring around
Right.
those times with the mythological side of it.
Yeah, my wife and me were talking, and we were kind of just trying to figure out. We were like, well, like, come on, quest for the Holy Grail and things.
Right, right. The
We're
Grail.
like, right. So we're like, how do we? I was like, how would that work? What would the Grail do? And we were like, what if it
Mhm.
got you back to from Death's Door? It was like the only
Oh,
effect that
that's
got you back
yeah, that's
from
a
it.
great prediction.
So then you could actually heal
Absolutely.
from Death's Door, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, let's take this a step further. It has to be a quest, right? So what if
Hmm.
you have a unique site and it's like, I don't know, the mountain that the Holy Grail's on or whatever,
Hmm.
right? And your avatar has to physically get to that location where it
Hmm.
is, and only an avatar can pick it up.
Yeah, or
So you can't
maybe
have
even
dudes coming to grab it for you. You have to get
you
there,
have to go there
and
with
each
your
of
avatar.
your opponent and you can both try to go grab the Grail,
Yeah, or it could potentially be something that only King Arthur can hold.
right?
Potentially, maybe can only be cast in the effect of a crusade, something like that.
Nice, yeah. Um, and this is an interesting one.
Mhm.
Favorite tournament snack?
So I come prepared. I usually bring a bottle of water, a cup of coffee, and a sandwich of some sort that I found at like a grocery store or convenience store the night before the event, and then 1 to 2 candy bars that I have just to kind of bring some energy to it.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've got my like tournament food like
Yeah,
locked in at this point.
dialed in. Nice.
And if you don't eat throughout, a lot of these bigger events can be 10, 11 hours of straight playing. So
Right.
you're on and you're going, and the games get really intense the
Mm-hmm.
further you progress. And the mental energy that's required to really keep your focus is huge. So having something that you can eat to kind of wake you up a little bit, fuel you up, and then something like coffee. I try to stay away from energy drinks that kind of make me a little jittery, but if I would need to,
Gotcha.
I could do that too.
Yeah, I've played in a couple of tournaments, and people that don't go to those major tournaments, they really don't understand that
Yeah,
mental fatigue's a real thing. That like
yeah, it's huge.
you're making so many decisions per game, and
Hmm.
you're like, okay, I've done five, I have eight, like I have eight total today, so I got
Hmm.
three more, and then
Hmm.
if I get to top eight, then I got like four more that I have to do after that. So
Yep, yep.
it's something you want to achieve, but you just have to you kind of pace yourself.
Yeah, and with that too, if you're doing well, every game is probably going to be a little harder than the last one,
Right.
with the odd potential that your opponent gets really, really bad luck and draws really poorly. But
Yeah.
for the most part, if you're doing well, you're going to be playing against people that are doing really well too. So it's going to get harder.
What's your favorite aspect in the game currently? Like it could be just the grid, it could be anything.
Hmm. I think the need to place your sites intentionally and then move your units around is so unique. It adds kind of that chess-like feel that I know
Hmm.
we've referenced a couple times. I think that the fact that it's also three-dimensional with the subterranean and the water sublevels really add a level of strategic depth that you don't see in other card games. And I think pairing that with the language that's used on the cards to describe their actions really makes you feel like you're playing something bigger than just a trading card game. The intentional use of language, I think, is really phenomenal, and allows you to create an internal narrative, imagining these scenes unfolding instead of just having tap to do one damage.
Right.
And that paired with moving the cards around the grid, I think is incredibly immersive and very enjoyable.
Yeah. The grid for me was the thing that hooked me more than
Yeah.
anything else. I played Warhammer for a little bit before
Hmm.
this, and it was stuff like that that I just like. I like the army building and then
Yeah.
like going out and fighting kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Um, your least favorite card in the game? It could be mechanics wise or anything.
Oh man, can I say C Raider because somebody bought all of them out and is like forcing the price up to like $300 on TCG Player?
The foil or just the
Yeah,
normal?
the foil.
Oh,
Yeah, no. But all joking aside, I think least favorite card in the game. Mm, I'm gonna go with the one that I like playing against the least, especially now that I'm playing Water. I'd say Giant Sharks or Pudge Butcher. But I actually no. Let me take that back. Chains of Prometheus. Absolutely
ah,
hate playing
yeah.
against Chains
I
of
was like, wait,
Prometheus. Like,
where's the chains?
yeah, Chains of Prometheus. The decks that I play are very minion heavy,
Hmm.
and I just get locked down by them, and you can't even submerge or bury them because they still affect the whole realm. So I would say Chains of Prometheus, mostly too because they're oftentimes either used in like Wolf Mob decks or Enchantress decks,
Ooh, I did not
and
think of
those.
it in a wolf deck.
Yeah, they're really great in wolf decks because you just have so many minions. So locking them the two that are highest, it really doesn't matter because they're going to buff the other ones around them.
Hmm.
So I've seen chains being played very effectively in those two, and it's really hard to deal with. I've lost games because of chains.
Yeah. Um, is sorcerer busted or just fine?
I think it's treading the line between potentially being broken, but it still requires you to be very intentional about how you're playing your sites. So I think if it's being looked at in terms of you still need to like do everything right to be able to start to use the sorcerer's ability, and by that point too, you're probably only going to be able to draw two by turn like 5 or 6. I would say that it's not broken, but say you get really lucky and you get that two Imperial Road drop plus a P Stone and a core on turn one, like
The
you,
dream
you can
play.
just yeah like you can just like start cycling your deck right there
Hmm.
and drawing two cards per turn very very quickly. So I think in that context maybe, but in a vast majority of games, I think that from what I've seen, it really only starts to ramp up around mid to late game, and by that
Hmm.
point, if your opponent doesn't have their own strategy in motion, I don't really see it as broken.
Gotcha. So last question,
Hmm.
and this is like a four parter. Favorite magic, minion, artifact, and site.
Okay. Favorite magic would have to say Geyser right now. Favorite minion, I think I would have to say the Sleeping Giantess right
Hmm.
now. Boss Troll is a close second. Favorite artifact and Peastone is really where it's at for me. But Torsimmer Trinket is also getting up there in terms of level of respect. And then favorite site, I have to say, is Mirror Realm because it can just copy anything. It's so good. Close second would be Pillar of Zyros.
Nice. Yeah. With that being said, that was all my questions. Thanks for coming on, man.
Oh
I've
yeah,
been doing this
absolutely.
for about an hour, and I thank you for coming on and being able to talk about your deck.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most interesting decks I've seen in a while.
Hmm.
It's kind of, the classic Earth Fire that's now just a staple in sorcery, but
Hmm.
with that hint of water, which is, yeah, I think changes the whole dynamic of the deck. And
Yeah.
I definitely will be building it and trying it out and trying to figure out if those pirate ships are all that you say they are.
Yeah, I am so honored that you shared that, and it's been so much fun. I think for me, the process of building the deck has been really exciting. I have been kind of toying with similar concepts for about like 3 or 4 months, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the Fury Road archetype becoming so widely played, I was trying to find a way to get the Giantess and the Dragonettes into a deck and to
Mm-hmm.
really use them effectively. And when Fury Road kind of debuted and kind of made its way from the community on Reddit, and I think some of the other communities on Discord, to win the Sorcery Con out in Seattle, I'm like, oh man, my idea is blown.
Yeah.
Like they cracked the code. But I wanted
Right.
to find a way to use those cards differently. And I love playing blue in Magic. I love the control
Mm.
element of it. I'm so happy this game doesn't have counter spells,
Not
but
yet.
it's
We've seen
not
them.
yet. Yeah, but I really like the control aspect of water, and to be able to take an idea that I had been working on for a few months, and then incorporate this new spin on it, and then to see it actually do well in a tournament setting, and then other people start to play it and use similar combos. I think for me is the biggest compliment that could be given. So thank you so much. I'd love to hear how it goes,
Yeah.
and if there's anything that you've done to refine it, I would love to hear that. I'm still actively refining it, thinking about what I can do to make it better. And the link that I sent to you, I'll keep for just historical purposes. So if
Nice.
folks want to look back at the top decks from the Courtesan Cup qualifier in Florida, they can see the one that was actually played instead of
Yeah.
the version that I've been toying with. So
Version
yeah,
7.2 or
right.
whatever it will be.
Yeah, I've got so many, as you know, like I've got so many. So
Yeah. One question. I know I said I had the last question was the last
yeah,
question,
yeah, yeah.
but is there anything currently that you're looking at that you're like, maybe I'll add this, just so if other people like me are kind of
Yeah.
interested in building it, kind
Hmm.
of point us in the direction of maybe what you're thinking about doing, so that maybe we
Yeah.
could help you all out, help you out by kind of testing it for you.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of cards that I'm thinking about. I don't want to blow my cover just yet because I do want to maintain some level of competition for the
Gotcha.
Cup in June. But let's just say auras are underutilized. So think about
Gotcha.
ways that you can use cards differently. And I would be interested if you can kind of crack that code and figure out what I'm trying to do.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. And just so people know, what's your YouTube channel? Just one more time.
Yeah, Archives of the Realm, and you can find me on Discord under Rudeasaurus. I'm on the main Discord and have kind of my own sub channel as well, which is focused on the community that we're building up. And if you see me on Tabletop Sim, it would be Rudeasaurus, but on YouTube, it's Archives of the Realm.
Awesome. Thank you again, man, for
Oh
coming
yeah,
and doing this. And we'll see you guys next time.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.